to be here, and I'm looking forward to just sharing some ideas with you. I can't promise that there's lots of new original things, but hopefully there might be a few things which will remind you of activities to do with teens, either in class or on Zoom. And hopefully somebody will, everybody will take something away with them. So I will share the screen now. Actually, I'll do it again, and remember to share the sound. I always forget that bit. Okay, lovely. So the name of this session is Teen Talk, and really we're looking at activities which will get our teens interacting, and hopefully remove that barrier that there often is when they're on Zoom. Particularly, I had a really interesting experience myself the other day, because we have been running a young learners course on Zoom with some of our teachers here and in other parts of Andalusia. And it was the first time I experienced the whole process of teens who didn't know me and didn't know each other coming onto the course, and some of them turning off their cameras and not wanting to put them on, etc. Because the teens that I've been teaching over the last year were with me in class prior to all of the lockdown period, and all knew each other and knew me. So I didn't have to face any of those kinds of problems. And I was doing a demo lesson the other day, and I was like, goodness me, how am I going to get these teens involved and encourage them to be with us fully there on the screen, etc. So that's given me a little bit of food for thought. I'm sure some of you have experienced that yourself. So let's talk about motivation and getting our teens involved. My first question here is, when should the engagement and the motivation begin? And I've suggested in 3 different moments. At the start of the course, when we first get to know them. Obviously, we're part the way through the course now, and you may well already know a lot of your teen groups, but hopefully a few of the activities that we talk about can also still be applied at the start of the lesson, and also as they leave the classroom or their computer, sort of keeping them motivated as they go away. Okay, so to begin with, a little activity which will involve you making some predictions. Perhaps you can put your predictions into the chat. Here are some figures about me, and there is a clue with regards to what they relate to. Some are perhaps more obvious than others. For example, 29 years, and that's related to my job. 27 years is related to a place. 6 years is connected to sport. 6, not 6 years. 6 is connected to sport. 16 is connected to family. 17 to football. I've seen that there's quite a few of you out there who know me, so will know that this is quite relevant for me, a huge football fan. And 7 connected to music. What do you think these numbers could relate to? Could you make some predictions either in the chat or just there? Get some ideas together, and I give you a moment or two and see what some of the ideas are in the chat. Okay. I've just taken that off the screen a moment. I've realized because I couldn't see the chat. Let's just share again so that you can make those predictions. Okay. Yeah, there's some interesting ideas here. Yeah, I like the one about supporting 17 football teams. I can be a bit fickle. Fantastic. A number of years that I've possibly been teaching. Oh, that's my favorite one so far, 29 years old. Thank you very much. I really like that. That's wonderful. Okay, fantastic. Okay, some very good ideas. So let's just see. Okay, excuse me a moment. Let's have a look again. All right. So I'll just tell you a little bit about myself, and you can see if your predictions are correct or not. Okay. So in 1992, I did my what was known then as C. Tefla course, which is now the SALTA course in Bristol. And those of you who are good at maths, which doesn't include me, will realize that that was 29 years ago. So yes, I have been teaching for the last 29 years, which when I say it, it sounds incredible. I can't quite believe it myself. I began teaching in Japan. I worked there for 2 years. And then after 2 years, I moved to Spain. And therefore, I started work at the Academia Britannica in Cordoba, where Fari works. And I had 5 very happy years there in Cordoba before moving to Seville. And that's where I started work in teacher training after a couple of years of teaching, etc. Although, of course, I still teach as well as doing the training. In terms of other pieces of information about me, well, I come from a big family. I have 2 brothers and a sister, and they're all older than me. I always enjoy saying that. I always like the fact that I will always be the baby of the family. And they have all had children, and those children are all now adults and having children as well. So in total, I have 16 nieces and nephews in the UK. That includes great nieces and nephews, which when I'm told in Spanish, that makes me a tia abuela. I'm not sure whether I like that too much, but and I also have 2 nieces and nephews here in Spain. In terms of my hobbies, then I'm a very big football fan, and that's number there, 17, actually relates to the number of years I've had my Sevilla Football Club season ticket, because I'm a big Sevilla fan. Although I did also used to go and watch Cordoba. So that prediction about having 17 football teams, well, I've kind of got 2 in Spain. And the other number related to sport is that I have been trying to get fit recently, and that is a number of kilometers that I can currently run at 6. I wish it were 17, like the number for the football, but it's in fact 6. And finally, in terms of other interests, I love music. I love going to concerts. Obviously, we're not able to do much of that at the moment, but in 2019, I went to see many local bands from Andalusia. I enjoy watching, listening to Andalusian music, and I went to 7 concerts. As I say, unfortunately, it's something we're not able to do at the moment, but that and going to football matches is one thing I am really looking forward to once this situation changes and we can start doing things like that again. Okay, so there you have the information. Okay, how correct were you? Okay, yeah, 16 children looking at some of these. Fantastic, sharing some of your ideas there. Okay, great. So that's an activity which I could do with my students. Why? Well, maybe it's quite obvious, but I do really believe that our students, our teens like to get to know us. And I think if you're prepared to be open with them and share information with them, they are going to hopefully be prepared to do the same with you and with their classmates. And so therefore, clearly that kind of activity can help to build rapport. It can then help students when they do the activity with each other, because I would then hand over there to them and get them to do the same, maybe to write down 3 or 4 numbers which are relevant, maybe not as many as I did, but depends on the level, etc. Maybe depends on the time available as well. And they may find that they've got things in common with others who are outside of their friends group, because quite often they might have been coming to, the same school or the same academy for a while. They tend to sit with the same friends. And I try to do an activity like this where I will mix them up, get them to work with other people who they don't necessarily always work with. Okay. And then I also think that it allows you as a teacher to find out about their language use, to identify also their interests, which I think is very important. You'll find out more about them, and you'll also see what level they're at. And hopefully the prediction element will be fun and it motivates the students to listen. It's an important skill to use in certain reading and listening tasks as well. We really want to try to activate schemata before students listen so that they don't get blocked so much, and gives them a reason to listen as well. And also the speaking skill element, sharing personal information, is something which is tested in exams. Okay, not only the exams, the progress reports that we might do with them, the progress exams in school, but also some of the proficiency exams. Okay, an alternative to this, let me just show you an alternative, which I call it full hand. And you listen to the information about me, count anything which is the same for you on your fingers. So for example, if I say I'm an English teacher, you will count 1. I think most people will be English teachers who are listening to the session. Then, for example, maybe I will say, I'm attending a conference at the moment. Okay, count 2 like this. Okay. When we get to 5, the students shout out full hand. Now, I thought we could maybe try this either with, when you get to 5, turning on your camera to show me that you have those 5 things in common with me, or by using the reactions, because of course on Zoom we have the different reactions, so you can get the students to actually put up their hand like that. Okay, so you can choose which to do. Let's see. I'm now trying to take my hands away. Oh, well, doesn't matter. We'll leave it there. Okay, so here's a bit more information. Okay, and count. And when you get to 5, full hand, and either put on your video to show me that you have 5 things in common with me, or raise the hand from the reactions. Okay, I've already told you quite a lot about myself, so I'm going to have to think of some new things. Okay, right, to begin with, let me tell you that after this session, I am going out for lunch, which is something which luckily at the moment in Seville we can still do as long as there are only 4 of us. Secondly, I have 2 older brothers. Thirdly, my birthday is in October. Fourthly, I'm a Scorpio. What else can I tell you? I spent this Christmas in Spain. I have some very good friends who live in Malaga. I think one of them I noticed is here in the session. So I have a good friend called Fiona. I love eating. I love eating actually, but I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But I love eating. My favorite thing at the moment is Greek yogurt with fruit. I'm a bit obsessed with that at the moment. Okay, so we've got people raising their hands. Does that mean that you have all 5 things in common with me? Okay, that's good to see. All right. So anyway, there's an example of how you can do this activity. Then, of course, you can get the students to ask you for more information. You can have a little bit of a conversation, ask them, okay, what were the 5 things that you had in common with me? Sometimes they're amazed to discover that they've got 5 things in common with the teacher. And then, of course, it's an activity that they can repeat with each other. And again, you can mix them up a little bit so that you may find that they've got things in common with students who they don't necessarily have within their friend group. I was telling Fari earlier that I did this activity. I demonstrated this activity in a session that I did with our CELTA trainees who have just finished this week. And we were doing a session on teaching younger learners. And then after the CELTA course finished yesterday, we went for a drink. And they started playing this activity, and they've already turned it into a drinking game, which of course wasn't the intention. But hey, if it works in class, it might work in other sort of environments and contexts too. Okay, let's move on. Okay. So a question for you. Do you find out about your learners' interests? How do you do it? And how can the information be taken into account when selecting coursebook material? Could you just share a little bit of information about how you do this into the chats, please? through chatting and pair work, yes? What other ways can you do this? Very nice idea, personalizing new language and vocabulary, definitely. It also makes the language much more memorable for them if it's personal. Obviously, the course books are very good, but we often have these fictional characters, and it's if we can personalize the language, then they're far more likely to remember it. Yes, Zoom poll, very good. I was going to mention the polls. They can be very useful. They can be great for the prediction activities as well. Okay. Lovely. Similar games. Yes, the truth with one false. Lovely. That's a good idea too. Guess the truth. Would I lie to you? Very nice ideas. Sharing photos too. Yes, we'll be doing that in a moment. Okay. Yeah, there's some lovely ideas here. Lovely ideas, some of which I'm going to be doing with you. So that's great to see. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So one thing that I get them to do, and I've got a selection here of course books from Macmillan, which I've used, is I involve them in selecting the areas to be focused on in the course book. So I'm sure you're in a similar situation to me, that it's unusual that I complete the whole course book by the end of the academic year. There's usually a unit or two at least which don't get completed just because of time, because you've perhaps included supplementary materials in your lessons, etc. And so therefore, at the beginning of the year, or maybe even part of the way through the year, when you can see that there are going to be, challenges completing the course book, I get them to look at the contents page, look at the different pages, and look at the units which they think would be interesting for them. Now, it's quite interesting how they do this, because some will do it based on topic, because they just say, oh, yes, great, fashion, fine, or leisure, or extreme sports, and they choose it based on topic. I think especially as they get older, higher in level, more mature, you can also get them to think about what areas do they think that they need to study. So they can also rank according to the areas of grammar or vocabulary covered, and like phrasal verbs. Last year I was actually teaching, until quite recently, a group who were in the first sort of year of B2 and will hopefully be going on to do first certificate either later this year or at Christmas. And so they were very much aware of the areas that they needed to work on. And so it wasn't only selection just based on their needs and interests in terms of topics, but also in terms of the areas that they felt that they needed to improve on. So you can do both, of course. And also the bottom three. Now, maybe you could use a poll for this, like a Zoom poll, if you're teaching through Zoom, as was suggested before. And I tend to find that there is a lot of correlation, because people say, well, what happens if you get so many different answers? But I do tend to find that there are certain units that they'll all choose, and there'll probably be a couple of units that most of them will say, no, we're not interested in those. Now, naturally, you need to look at those units which you're discarding, because there could be a very important area of grammar or lexis within those units. And that's when you have to think about how you're going to include those areas in the curriculum. So it might mean including supplementary materials, or doing your own grammar or lexis presentation or whatever. But again, I think that students will be more motivated if they've been involved in selecting what's going to be in the course, and hopefully you can satisfy everybody's needs. Even if they don't have all of their top 5 included, at least they should have a few of the units. Okay. Let's just move on. Now, another thing that you can do, again, I'm sure these are things that a lot of you are doing anyhow. Sometimes it's just finding the time, isn't it? But having a discussion on what they like, what they don't like doing in class, or getting them to write an email to the teacher. Again, it can be an email about what they like doing in class, about what they feel they need to improve on. It can just be an email telling you all about themselves. I'm sure you do things like that with them. But you do find out a lot of interesting information, as well as the fact that it can be diagnostic. You're not doing the email from an accuracy point of view, but it will give you quite a lot of information about how they're using English, especially if you encourage them to talk about their past learning, or what they liked last year, etc., what they want to do this year. So you're encouraging them to use a range of tenses, or to tell you about their past, about their hobbies, about their future plans, whichever way you want to do it. I also like to get them to come up with some positive statements about why they're learning English. Sometimes I produce statements like this: English can help me to understand lyrics to the songs I like, play online games, go on a study trip, etc., and get them to tick the ones which are relevant to them, or they can come up with the list themselves. But seeing the use of English from a positive point of view, even if it is to help me pass my exam, to help me get my B1, but getting them to think about what it's the sort of the power of English, what they're going to be able to do through learning English. Okay. So let's think about things that we can do at the start of the lesson. Okay, creating interest in the topic. So for example, this was a class that I did recently. First of all, I asked them, what do you think is the most important invention? And of course, the mobile phone came up, as we would expect, but they also came up with the light bulb, the wheel, and the computer. And again, this kind of discussion on what they think is most important and why can reflect a little bit the kinds of oral exam activities that they're being asked to do. So I asked them, what is the most important invention? And then what we decided to do was think about what we would invent if we could. And we did that through looking at an example from this program, Dragon's Den. Now, many of you might be familiar with this. And I really liked this particular example because it's two girls making a presentation to the judges who are trying to decide whether they're going to invest in this new product or not. So we'll just have a quick look at it together. We'll just go out the full screen to do this. Excuse me a moment. And here we have it. Hopefully. Okay, let's see if we can. No, that's one we'll be looking at afterwards. Here we go. Okay. So we'll just see the beginning of this presentation.
We can't see it, Claire.
Oh, okay. Thank you for letting me know. Hold on, let's try again.
That's it. Yeah. Oh, no.
Okay. That's strange. It was working earlier. Sorry, please bear with me one moment. Let's just try again.
Okay, great.
I'm Kate Ballantyne and this is my sister Sky. We're here today to ask for £25,000 in return for 10% of our company, CLIC Limited. Our company has two directors, my mum, Ali Ballantyne, and a family friend, Jeremy Wilson. Sky and I both hold 50% of the shares. We started our company because we really believe that our harness can help teach children how to ride their bikes much quicker.
When I heard that my holiday homework was to invent something for a school technology competition, I thought, wow, I'm really going to go for this. I was wondering what to do when I noticed a man teaching his son to ride a bike in the park. The man was struggling because he was bent over holding the back of the seat and the handlebars, and he was getting a bad back.
Sky created the CLIC harness, a harness with a handle on the back, which allows the adult to run with a straight back. If the child wobbles, they can feel the safety of the harness around them.
We have registered the CLIC trademarks. We know that our product is unique because we have applied for a UK patent and we have asked for it to be accelerated.
We'd now like to invite on our directors to help us answer any questions you may have.
Thank you.
Den rules only allow company directors, Ali and Jeremy, to negotiate any deal with the Dragons. But the young entrepreneurs and
Okay, so when the students were watching this particular video, they had to decide whether or not, well, they had to identify what the product was, etc. And then they had to decide whether or not they think it could be a good investment. And we listened again because they need a little bit more detail. I mean, they speak quite clearly, but obviously they're speaking quite naturally. And then once that had taken place, it then moved on to them coming up with their own inventions. And we looked at some useful language which they could use to describe their inventions, etc. And then they had to sell their inventions to each other. And they came up with some good ideas, and interestingly, they were all kind of related to the current situation as well, with you know, all of our how our lives have been changed recently through COVID. But it worked really well, and it was nice to be able to use an authentic model in the class. And again, it's something that you could do online if you're teaching through Zoom, or you could do it in the classroom. I actually did it in the classroom, but I think it could work just as well, as long as you can access a video, share the screen, etc. Okay, so we'll just return to my PowerPoint. Okay. Now, also something else that I'm very aware of with a lot of our teens who are sort of B1 level, B2, but particularly those who are studying for PET, for the preliminary test, is the fact that they often have to learn some, you know, really complicated structures, ones which they're not producing orally or in written form in a natural way. Often, if you give them the grammar exercises, they can do them to a certain degree of success with a certain degree of accuracy. But I was teaching a group of students who were sort of preliminary, pre-PET, and they were being given all kinds of structures that they had to learn, and often it wasn't being done in the most memorable way, shall we say. So I'm going to give an example again of how we can use video, but as a way to lead into a grammar presentation. And I would just like you to think about two things. Firstly, and you may well be familiar with this video, this clip from this film called, well, you can see what the title is. I'm not going to pronounce it in case I pronounce it incorrectly. And the first thing to think about is, what problems does a man have when babysitting? And also, from a teacher's point of view, how could you exploit this clip to introduce an area of grammar? And I'm talking more about the context. I'm not talking about the language he uses in the clip, but how could you exploit this? Again, just bear with me whilst I share the screen with another YouTube video. Just bear with me. Okay, my screen has decided to freeze. Okay.
I think I've got the clip. Do you want me to try and share it?
I'm sorry, Fari?
I think I've got the clip. Do you want me to try and share it?
I think I've just got it here now. Can you see this?
Not yet.
Okay, right, let's try again. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. You always cue them up beforehand, and then
abacus. Abacuses aren't that much fun, are they? I don't know why people think they're fun. Look at this. Look, it's bolts on a plank. Fun bolts. No, not very fun. Hey. Oh. A little birdie. Look, he sings. Oh. And if that mockingbird don't sing, then Greg is gonna buy you a diamond ring. And if that diamond ring gets sold, Greg's gonna feel like a big asshole. No, you don't want to say that word, though. We don't want to say that word because that's a bad word. No. Tadpole. Can you say tadpole? Mad roll. Don't say. No, Jack's mole, because Jack has a big mole on his face.
Okay, some of you are probably familiar with that clip. So can you just think about, well, clearly he's having problems babysitting. I'm sure you've all realized that. Oh, just bear with me a minute because the video is still playing underneath. Okay. I think I've just closed that now. Yeah, he's having those problems babysitting, but what area of grammar could you perhaps use that for? Any ideas? Okay. I'm glad to see that you enjoyed the clip. Okay, so first conditional, that's interesting. Okay, conditionals, should and shouldn't. Yeah, some very good ideas there. These, of course, are all areas, modals of deduction. Great, the imperative. I mean, this is a thing. You can probably think of many different ways of exploiting a video clip and a short one, and it's going to engage your teens, and you can think about the language it could lend itself to, which is great. I'll show you what I decided to use it for. Okay. So when I used it, it was to introduce the way of talking about past wishes and regrets. It was coming up in the book. So Greg wishes he hadn't, if only he hadn't, etc. Greg wishes a baby wouldn't. So, you know, the use of would to express, wishes with would to express annoyance. We then went on to watch the next clip, another short clip where the grandfather comes home, Robert De Niro, and he's very, because the baby's been allowed to run riots, and he's obviously not happy with Greg. And then the baby says his first word to the grandfather. Now you can all imagine what that first word was. And so they can also talk about what the grandfather should and shouldn't have done, etc. And these marker sentences were really remembered well by the students. And you know, these students were a low B1 level. They were having to be introduced to this kind of grammar, which was later going to come up in the exam, which they'd be doing the following year. But they did remember these sentences. You know, Greg wishes he hadn't stayed alone with the baby, or whatever. The next class I asked them. Now, as you can probably imagine, they also remembered another word as well. They remembered that key word, and I don't know whether I should, well, I did laugh, but I said to one of my students as they were coming in and we were having a chat, and it was another female who, like me, is mad on football, and she supports the rivals Betis. And I sort of said to her, oh, what about Real Madrid and Betis at the weekend? And I think Madrid had won and they've been lucky. And she said, yes, Claire, the referee was an arsehole. And I thought, oh no. But it goes to show if they have an emotional connection with a word, they remember it. So, but they also remembered the structures, which is very important too. Okay, so that's a way of using video to engage the learners and bring up those marker sentences.
What knocks it over?
Hello? Okay, let's carry on. And then, of course, you can use your typical practice activities from the course books to then help the students produce in a more controlled way the structures. Okay. So now somebody who's in this session, a good friend of mine, Fiona, she's going to laugh about this because this is an activity that we do at New Year. And it's an activity which I'm sure many of you could be familiar with and can also be transferred into the classroom. And I think it's a really nice way of getting the students to think positively about the upcoming year. Okay, I see. Right. When I have this on full, I can't see. I see there's some things coming up in the chat, which is great. So I'll just have to, I can't get the chat up. Okay, just nice comments. Lovely. Okay, I'll go back to the screen. Okay. Okay, so I hope everyone can still see the screen. So on a piece of paper, write numbers 1 to 6. And this is a really good fun thing to do yourselves. And against each number in secret, write one thing that you want to do this year. For example, get a piercing, learn a new language, take up a new sport. Okay, nice positive things. With either a dice or with a peer select a number between 1 to 6. Now, obviously, it depends on the circumstances. I mean, we can use dice as long as students have individual ones which have been sprayed or gelled or whatever, or they can make, they can just put 1 to 6 on little pieces of paper, screw them up, and then they have to choose a number, etc. And they choose a number, and whatever is written against number is the first and most definite thing to do that year. And then they repeat until they've used all of the numbers. It's quite nice if you make it interactive, actually. So you could, just have one student saying to the other, number 4. And they say, oh, my number 4 is, I'm going to take up paddle, for example, or I want to learn French or whatever. And so whichever is the first one is the one that they have to do first, or they got to try to complete first within the year. Now, the funny thing is, when I did this with my friends a couple of years ago, I said, oh, right, my number, the first one which came up for me, which was number 4, was to get my nose pierced. And I actually did it. And then I saw them all a couple of months later, and they said to me, oh, you've got your nose pierced. I said, well, I thought we had to because of the activity. And I'm glad that I did. So going from this, you can move on to them then putting these pieces of information about themselves into sentences, and you can either test, or it could be to practice different structures to talk about the future. So for example, I'll definitely, because we often use will for something that we feel strongly or certain about, I'll definitely take up paddle this year. Then maybe using going to for plans, or even as a present continuous, actually, I'm going to learn French in the next 12 months. Planning to is perhaps a little bit less certain, so I'm planning to eat more fresh fruit, for example. Hoping to, may or might. And then even I would like to, but it's unlikely, maybe the 6th thing which came up or whatever. Or maybe they can just see what's on their list. And although they've had the fun of the game of which one they've got to try to do first, they can just apply what's on their list to here and think about which things they're more likely to do, which things they're less likely to do, etc. Share the information. And it can be an ongoing thing. You can ask them, have you done this yet? Have you not done this yet? And see if they're managing to fulfill any of their resolutions or plans. Okay. This was my New Year plan. My first plan of the year was to get a kitten, and I did. And so I fulfilled the first one on my list. And this is little Lily to introduce to you all. Okay, and she's been a very welcome addition to the household. Okay. Oh, gone the wrong way there, excuse me. Okay, another alternative to this is an activity called Time for a Change, where students write down as many things that they do every day. Write down as many things you do every day. I'm sorry, that's not correctly worded, is it? But they write down as many things as they can that they do every day. And then they tick those things which they like doing, and they circle those things that they would like to change, because obviously there's things in their daily routine which they don't enjoy and things which they do. Okay. And then they cross out the noun in the like to change sentences and write a different one to express what they would like to do. So for example, doing housework, don't particularly enjoy it, and I would love to do yoga. I'd like to take up yoga. I've got lots of friends who do yoga and really enjoy it. And then they have to imagine that it's 2022, and they have to tell their partner how their life has changed. So in the last year, da, 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 da. So just in the chat, could some of you write how you would complete that sentence to see what kind of structures come up? So you're looking back and talking about what you've achieved in the last year. Can you give me an example? So in the last year, da, 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 in the chat, which I'll just, okay, I'll just open so I can see it too. Okay. So in the last year, let's have a look. I have learned how to relax and take time for myself. In the last year, I started meditating. In the last year, I learned to bake. So this is quite interesting, isn't it? Some people are talking about last year and things which they've done are completed, and some people are talking about sort of from then to now. So we've got some simple past and present perfect. Okay, I've cooked more than any other year. I'm sure that's the same for a lot of us. We've been doing lots of home cooking. I've grown to enjoy cooking a lot more than I did before. Not that I pretend to be particularly good at it, but yeah, in the last year I changed careers. Okay, so also you could use it, and it's interesting because I think it's really interesting to see what we come up with naturally here. I think I probably would have been saying in the last year, I've been doing something. So maybe present perfect continuous as well. In the last year, I've been going running, for example. But we have different structures, and I think it's worth seeing what we produce naturally and to help the students with that as well. Okay, Justine, you did study CELTA. I remember. Lovely to see you, or see that you're here with us today. That's fantastic. Okay, right. So that's just an alternative, you know, get them to think about things that they'd like to change, and then to look back on those changes. And so I think it's quite nice as well to encourage them to think about achievements. That's another thing that I've looked at with the students, about the things that they've achieved in the last year. And sometimes they say, oh, nothing. And actually, you can make them realize that however small it is, they've made lots of personal achievements, and that can be a very nice way of sort of reflecting, you know, this time of year, they're looking back at what's happened in the last 12 months and the things that they've achieved. You know, as some of your examples as well, you know, I've learned how to cook, or I've done a lot more cooking. And the students can usually, you know, even as I've passed my exam, which I found difficult. And I think it's a very nice idea to talk about achievements. Okay, let's return to the PowerPoint. Bear with me one moment, please. Okay. Okay, so now I've got a feeling that quite a few of you might know this story, and I do apologize, but it is my favorite story, and it's one that I use with the students. And I use it as a live listening, and I use it so that it can be then followed up on with some productive skills work. It could be language practice. It could be fluency work. Here is a picture of my family. Now, this was taken a few Christmases ago. Unfortunately, I'm probably like so many of you, I didn't get the chance to spend time with my family this Christmas. You can see my mother in the middle. In this photo, she would have been, I think, 87. She's now 90. She's amazing. Unfortunately, her intention of coming here to celebrate her 90th birthday in April had to be cancelled. So that's on hold until whenever we can next do it. She's still getting on planes. Although obviously things are difficult at the moment. And you can see I mentioned I had 2 older brothers and my older sister. My story is called My Brave Big Sister. And again, apologies if you've already heard this story. I know I tell it a lot, but it is a favorite of mine. And I'll explain why in a moment. But before I tell it, I would like you to make some predictions based on these key words about my brave big sister. Okay. South Africa, 2 young children, rifle, neighbour, husband, shaking, shovel and garden. All right. In the chat, could you please make some predictions on what the story could be about? Okay. There are the words. Okay. I'm going to have a look in the chat. Okay, I'm saying that it's not sharing at the moment, so I'm going to just stop sharing and see what ideas you've come up with. Okay, some nice ideas here. Someone was shaking with fear, something to do with a wild animal, a rifle in the garden, a carjacking. Your sister protected 2 young children from an abusive neighbor using a rifle. Some very good ideas. When she lived in South Africa, did she have to use the rifle to defend 2 children? She attacked someone with a spade. They had a rifle. Okay. Yeah, it's certainly going to be a dramatic story, isn't it? So let's go back to it. Thank you very much for your range of ideas there. Okay. So here we go. I'll tell you the story. Some of you might have spotted the photo underneath the slide to the left. But anyway, this is a story of my sister. And this actually took place a long time ago. It took place, I think it would have been at the end of the 1980s, the beginning of the 1990s. Probably, no, it would have been the end of the 80s, actually. My sister and her husband lived in South Africa for 4 years because of her husband's job. And at the time, my 2 nieces, just to give you some idea, my 2 nieces who are now in their late 30s and have children of their own were 2 young children. And one day they were out playing in the garden and my sister was inside cleaning when she suddenly heard this loud noise that sounded like a shot. And she thought, what on earth is that? And she heard her neighbor shouting, Jill, Jill, my sister's name, Jill. And she went running out into the garden and she looked up at the neighbor's house, and up in the window was the neighbor with a rifle. And the neighbor said, Jill, Jill, there was a snake in the garden. I tried to shoot it, but it's gone into your garden. Now, what my sister did was she says now she's not quite sure why she did this, but she got my 2 nieces and put them both on garden chairs in the garden, just lifted them up on the chair. She looked for something, picked up a shovel and went to look for the snake. Now, she found the snake and it was curled up next to the fence. And she said, really, without thinking, she just started hitting the snake with the shovel and thought she killed it. Okay. She took the kids into the house, etc. And later that evening, her husband came home from work with a colleague who was South African and explained to him what had happened. And so they went out into the garden and the colleague had a look at the snake and he said to my sister, Jill, have you got any idea what you've done? And she sort of said, well, no. And he said, you've killed one of these, a spitting cobra. Now, obviously, if this kind of snake spits in your eyes, you go blind. She had killed it. I mean, it's a shame, but obviously mother's instinct took over. But she said it was only at that moment when she really realized what she had done that she began shaking with fear, as some of you said in your predictions. Okay. So some of your predictions were on the right track. Yeah, they certainly involved neighbors and rifles, etc., and a wild animal. Very well done. Obviously, when I tell this story, the students are listening to check their predictions. And I do tend to find that, you know, to be honest, students of any age, adults and teens, find the story quite interesting, but the teens usually react quite strongly to it. Now, can you think about what you could do as a follow-up? What could your students now do in pairs or groups? Now, there can be a variety of things. Again, I mean, it's been a live listening. They've listened to you. You could repeat the story if necessary, or you could script it, of course, and then you could give them the script and they could be looking at areas of language, grammar or lexis in the script. Can you think of an activity which either has a grammar or lexis aim, maybe an activity with an oral fluency aim, or an activity with a writing skills aim? And I'm just checking the time and I realize we're practically out of time. So this will be the last thing we do. Can you just try to think of an activity of one of those three things that you could then do with your students to practice the productive skills work? Okay. Grammar or lexis, oral fluency, writing skills. Okay, some of you have to go. Thank you very much for coming. What ideas do you have? What they would have done differently? I like that. Yeah, telling a story about a family member or friend. I mean, obviously, that's a dramatic story. It doesn't have to be as dramatic. Or it could be a story just about an animal. I could have told the story about how I'd just got Lily, for example. Role play. I like that idea. Yeah, role play with an interview. Very nice. Okay, reported speech. Signposting, some very nice ideas here. Future tense as a fortune teller, that sounds like a good idea, etc. Interview your sister. Yeah, she always finds it fascinating that I use this story about her. But one of the reasons why I use it is I am absolutely terrified of snakes. I'm petrified from a young age. A lady brought a snake into our school and a boa constrictor and did a presentation. And I remember that when we finished, we were all about 8 or 9, we could all line up and stroke the snake. And I remember I sort of did this and it turned around and looked at me, and I remember feeling terrified. And ever since then, I've had a bit of a phobia. So I couldn't believe it that my sister had done this. But her instinct, I guess, took over. Okay, there are some really nice ideas there. Thank you very much. So I understand that we need to stop now, obviously, but there are a few other activities which are included in my PowerPoint, and I am very, very happy to send you a copy of this PowerPoint. So if you would like to have a copy, I'll just share my email with you. Okay, and just send me an email, please, and I'd be delighted to hear from you and also to get any personal feedback. And let's just go through quickly. There's a few things here about as the children leave. This is what we haven't had time to do, but sort of preparing things like a presentation like this at home, maybe using something like Kahoot and getting them to make a Kahoot or make the questions for Kahoot, etc. Okay. So this is my email. If any of you would like a copy of the PowerPoint, I would be very happy to send it to you, and it would be really nice to hear from you and to get any feedback. And this is only the second time I've done a webinar like this. It's been a new experience. So thank you all very much for attending.
Thank you, Claire. That was amazing. I've got half of my lessons planned for next week.
Oh, thank you.
Scribbling away ideas, lots of ideas as usual. And I'll just remind everybody that you will receive a feedback questionnaire. We'd be really grateful to have your feedback, and that if you would like a certificate of attendance, then give us your email in that feedback and we'll send it to you in the next week or so. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you very much. Lovely. Hopefully see some of you all again very soon, and all take care of yourselves and keep well. Bye-bye.
Hope so. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.